Okay, right, Connie, if you wanted to introduce yourself first.
Yeah, well, my name's... Say Connie or Constance?
Whatever you
Connie
want to be
Rees.
called.
Most people call me Connie. My name is Constance, but most people call me Connie Rees, yes.
So when and where were you born?
I was born in Bethnal Green on the 6th of the 9th, 1919, which makes me 79.
So that's obviously in London.
London,
Was that where you
yes.
spent most of your childhood?
Yes, we moved from there into Hackney soon after I was born. My father died when I was 1 year, 1 month old, and my mother remarried when I was 5.
Do you remember your real father at all?
Not at all, I was only 1 year, 1 month. And it's only recently that I found anything about him at all, because when my mother remarried, she would not speak about my father at all. She said, "This is your father, these are your brothers and sisters," which was quite right, really. And it's only recently, I've just got 2 photographs of him, one in his hospital blues when he was gassed. But somebody's been doing some research for me, and I've now found out, and I'm quite pleased, a little bit about what the kind of person he's like. And she got it through his 2 medals. And she's found out what he did in the First World War, what he did in between, which has been quite exciting. Found out that in the First World War, in the First World War, evidently, what happened, you enrolled or enlisted, but you didn't get your medical until some time because of the number of people. And evidently my father enlisted in the Royal Fusiliers, and it was about a month or so later they had his medical. And the research shows now that he had a very bad heart and very bad lungs, already had severe bronchitis, and he was discharged immediately. So then he became a steward on a boat going to Canada. Came back, and in 1917 he rejoined and enlisted again, but in a different, he enlisted in the Royal Army Service Corps, and again the same thing happened. He was sent out before he got his medical, and that's when he got gassed.
So he actually that's how he died?
And yes, he came home, he was in hospital, and he came home weekend, so I was conceived, went back into hospital, and my mother used to say it was Orpington. And the story goes, often you say, "Why am I called Constance Eveling?" And she said, "Well, there was a very nice Sister Constance, looking after your father. And I was pregnant, and I said, if ever this is a little girl, she'd be called Constance Eveling after you." So that's how I got my name.
Oh, that's a nice
And
story.
I was born September the 6th, and he died October the 23rd, 1920.
Do you have absolutely no recollection?
Nothing at all, just 2 photos. But what I did find out is height, colour of his eyes, all from his army records, which is quite nice. Yeah, so it's been quite nice.
So you've got brothers and sisters?
Yeah, half brothers and sisters, but to me they're not. We were discussing this the other day. I was telling them I went down to see my sisters. They live in Chingford in London. And I was saying I found out about my dad and things. And they were saying to me, "Well, you know, doesn't make any difference, does it really? We're sisters." And she said, "We're sisters and brothers, there's no difference." And I think because of my mother was a very strong-minded lady, that the family, there's never any breach. Now, we're very lucky, Hugh and I, because we have 3 children who all get on so well together, always phoning each other, etc. And their spouses all get on well together. So much so last year, my daughter came over from America with the grandchildren, and my daughter, who lives just outside Oxford, with her husband and 2 children, and my son, his wife, and their 3 sons, they all went on holiday together. And I was waiting for the cracks in the seam now, but they came home and said it was such a marvellous holiday, we're all going to go again in the Millennium year. So they all get on well, and my sisters and brothers all get on well, and they like my family and the grandchildren, so we're very fortunate.
So it was like that when you were younger, was it? Because obviously you were very young when your brothers and sisters were born.
Yes, I'm quite a bit older than my brothers and sisters, because I'll talk about the war later, but yes, they're a lot younger than I am. But I never thought of them as anything else but my brothers and sisters. And we were, in a sense, an unusual family, because my mother was reasonably well educated. She could put a good letter together. She was educated she was born in Brown Road in Hackney, or went to Broke Road church school for 6pence a week. And then when my father died, she moved into another part of Hackney, which was slightly poorer. But she spent a great deal of her time helping other people. She couldn't stand humbug and things like that. And even before she died, she was always having a go about things which was unjust and unfair. And I think that's what I've inherited. Yes. Yeah.
So you got on very well with your mother, did you?
Oh yes. My stepfather, he was very quiet. And we used to have conversations, but the person who was the dominant figure in the house was Mother. I can always remember I came home from school. You always knew Mother was in because she was playing the piano. She couldn't sew, couldn't knit, and she used to play the piano. And I remember saying, if a button came off any of our clothes, she would say, well, either pin it or sew it yourself. I've got a bad heart, I can't sew, it makes my heart bad. But she spent hours and hours on the piano. We also had an organ. And when we went shopping on a Saturday, we used to look out for instruments. Any second-hand instruments, a lyre, a squeeze box, and bring them home. We would just have music everywhere. And my childhood was just full of music, absolutely. And she was a very good musician. And the other funny thing was that there was a barrel organ used to come round in those days, and they used to ask for a few pence. And I don't remember seeing a monkey on the top. And they used to come down our road. And my mother in the summer used to take them out cold drinkers and meat sandwiches. But on a Sunday, they were not allowed ever to play, only hymns. And he could only afford one hymn. So every Sunday evening, I used to go to bed with this organ outside in the road playing, "Glory to me, my God, this night." And I mean, whenever I hear this hymn, I permanently see myself in bed with this organ going. And you see, I've got a picture in there of Christ knocking at the door. It's called the...
Behold, I am the knock.
No, it come to me in a moment. It's the Christ knocking at the door, right? It's a famous painting. And I used to look at that and hear this man playing the organ, you see, and you go to sleep with that because we were told to look at this picture of Christ knocking at the door, Holt's painting.
Holbein,
that's right. And that was it, you see. So music, and she was there, and people knew my mother, and if there was an injustice, she would be around. I mean, in those days, people don't know they're born these days with the benefits they can get. In those days, if anybody was poor, you had to go on what they call public assistance, and they would give you vouchers for bread, vouchers for meat, but they had to make sure that there wasn't anything in your house surplus to requirements. You had to sell it before you had money. And I remember on a couple of occasions, people used to say to my mother, "The man's coming from the public assistance, Smithy." He used to call her, my mother's married name was Smith. And she said, "Smithy," and I don't know what we're going to do. And my mother used to say, "Well, I'll be there with you," see. And she would have a go. And if they were going, it would be called a tribunal now, but it was a meeting, and it was about a mile away. And she used to say to me, "You come with me. I'm going with this lady about this getting this public assistance. They're not going to treat people like that."
So they were poor people that were coming to your mother for help,
yes,
for advice.
And advice.
Do you remember any cases in particular?
Tell them about the man who collapsed in the middle of the road.
Oh yes, there was. See, there's another incident. You see, our part of our road, this side where we lived was Hackney, and this side was Bethnal Green. And when anybody was ill, if they collapsed, whichever road they collapsed in, they were responsible for their treatment and their burial. Well, a man collapsed in our road, and there were the people arguing, was he in Bethnal Green or was he in Hackney? And they were going on. In the end, my mother got so fed up, she called my youngest sister out. And my sister, she said to my sister, "Pick up his legs, bring him over to our side." So they picked up this man, he was dead, put him down. She said, "Now he's Hackney, and he'll have a decent funeral." And that was my mother. She just couldn't stand all this humbug. Well, where should this... The man was dead. I mean, what dignity. My mother's also, we were chapel folk anyway. And that was one of the things. And the other thing happened, you see, when people had a row, people opposite us had an argument, and there were two people living in a house, but they had to use the same street door, and I never forget this, and they said, "I will never ever use that street door again." And as long as I remember, it was the old-fashioned window. Everybody got in and out by putting the window up, never used that door again. And my mother used to try to help these people to get friendly again. But that was, and I mean, she used to say to me, "I'm going to a meeting somewhere, would you please come with me?" And I'd go with her, and I'd say, "Are we going to see somebody important, Mum?" "Nobody's important. Everybody's important to somebody. We're all equal. But remember, you are no better than anybody else, Connie, but then neither are you better than anyone else either." And occasionally I would say to her, she'd say to me, if she's had a bad day at meetings, she'd say to me, "Remember this, don't ever respect a person's position. Doesn't matter what their position says they're like, don't respect it."
What was the sort of meeting she went to?
Well, she used to go with people to the public assistant board about getting money.
So how did that work exactly?
Well, I don't remember. I was quite young. I mean, I was 10, 11 or 12. But I know that if you were sort of lost your job and you never had any money, then you would go down, they would decide. First of all, they'd come and inspect your house. I remember that. And I remember the woman up the road asked my mum to come with her. And she went up the road and they were looking round to say, well, you don't really need that. You could have a bed, you could have a table, you could have chairs. But I mean, maybe you had a little gramophone. And they would say, well, you ought to sell that before you get your public assistance. And I mean, I know on occasion, my mother's hid something for them in our house before they've come. And said, well, they need a bit of music. I mean, especially if it was music. And she'd have their gramophone for them. And then say, okay, you know. And then they would have to go and meet these people to talk about vouchers and things like this. And they were given, my mother thought it was degrading. You could have a bread ticket and a voucher and vouchers for this. And as we were going along, she used to say to me, you know, remember this. Don't ever respect a person's position. Respect the person and what they've done. And she was a big one for quotes, you see, and another quote of hers, my brother would come home from school, or I would, and say, Mum, I've done really well at school. She'd put her arm out and say, remember this, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And by the time she said that, you'd really forgotten what you were going to say, you know, and it had all gone, yeah.
Did you have a good relationship with your mother?
Oh yeah, very good. We used to sort of discuss things a lot, and she was a great one for reading things in the paper. She used to take Thompson's Weekly and Tidbits, you see, and she used to talk to us a lot about politics. She always had theories, as you will know. I mean, she always used to say about the people in the last war. Was it Kitchener? She always felt that he didn't really drown at sea.
She was a conspiracy theorist.
She was a conspiracy. She felt he was really going off to Russia, you see.
So Elvis was never dead.
No, so Elvis is never dead, that's right. And she used to talk to us a lot about politics and religion and quotes and things like this, yes. And she used to say things, and we used to believe her. I mean, you know, she used to tell us stories about what happened many years ago about the way the country treats people. She said, just think of somebody served in the war, and you go through London Fields, which is the other side of Hackney, and you see people there with frozen feet and fingers. No one's looking after them. What kind of country do we live in? And we were brought up with this.
That was obviously the days before the NHS, well before
the
NHS.
Long before 1948 in the
NHS.
NHS.
What were the other types of care that weren't available then? What were the sort of things?
Social services care. You helped each other. Now, if anything's wrong, you go to services to pick up the pieces. Your neighbours picked up the pieces. I remember my mother say to us, now, look, Dad's in, but the woman down the road's child's ill and she's been up all night. Could have been whooping cough, I don't know. But I'm going down there to give the mother a break. I'm going to sit up all night. And I don't want to squeak out of you children. We didn't squeak, wouldn't dare. You know? So, I mean, you helped each other.
Was it a strong community spirit in that
way? Oh yes, very, very much. And when we moved to 1940, just after the Blitz started, and to what is now supposed to be a terrible place with the Kingsmead estate. We were given a flat there. And they were very nice. You had to be checked out before you even got into the flat, you see. And that community built up again. And when we read about this awful estate, it was one of the worst estates in London, my mother, it wasn't even, there was a very funny incident once, I can't mention the names, but we went home to see Mum when she was with me, we were married, and she was speaking about the neighbours upstairs who weren't very nice. She said, you can't have those people living here, she said, they've got to be able to live in a house and live properly. And she mentioned their name, and they'd happened to be on probation to shoot at some point. My mother said, if I'd known, she said, that my son-in-law had them on probation, I would have been in court with him, she said, saying something about, you see, if you saw a child spit in the street, she said, excuse me, you do that with a handkerchief, you don't spit on the ground. And nobody minded. And we had the Salzmicks this side and the Solomons that side. And when the Blitz started, I mean, Mr. Solomon used to come in and say to my mother, Smithy, say Germans invaded, what would we do? We're Jews. Mama said, Solomon, stop worrying, we'll deal with it when it comes. And then one day he came in and he said to my mother, Smithy, he said, I'm not worried about if the Germans invade England anymore. Mum said, thank God for that. Why is that, Solomon? He said, well, I reckon if Hitler himself came over and met you, he'd go back.
Did your mother have quite a high standing then in the community? Like
yes.
Socially, not
Yes, yes. I mean, people would come in for all kinds of things. I mean, many years ago, I remember when a young girl came in, this was long before the war, and she said that she was pregnant and she'd been turned out. She was about 13. And my mother said, come in. And she said to her, you share a bed with your sister. And she stayed with us until she went into the Clapton hostel for unmarried mothers, a hospital there. Yeah. She just had this manner. I mean, and right to her end, she was always having a go at something. I mean, when the lorry parked outside our house, she went up to the town hall and said, you don't pay your rates to look outside a lorry. And it was moved. It was moved. And one day she said to me, it was after school, I want to come with me, Connie, we're going to Scotland Yard. And I said, Mum, that's a long way off. She said, I know, but I'm going up to Scotland Yard. When we got to Scotland Yard, I can see it now, Jane, sat there. And she said, I've come to see Inspector Young. So the man said, have you got an appointment, madam? No, but he'll see me. So she sat down, and there she sat. And then this man came out. I can see him there with Pips, very important looking man. And he said, yes, madam, do you want to see me? Yes, she said, the pub opposite my house has changed hands. It's called the Suffolk Arms, and it's at Charrington's. And it's changed hands for the worse. They're serving drinks after hours, it's noisy and keeping my children awake at night, and that's not good for their health. I want you to do something about it. But she didn't go to Hackney Police. Oh no, she went to Scotland Yard. And it was changed. Nobody ever sold drinks after hours again. And, you know, I was brought up like this. You know.
How did your mother achieve this kind of standing in the community? Was there always somebody like that? Was there always...
I don't know, she was always there. I mean, people knew... It's a bit like, in a way, myself here. I mean, I had these children, the little boy came and knocked to see me this morning. And if people in Stevenage now have been here so long, the phone's always going, saying, oh, I wonder if you could help, I've been given your name. You know, I'm not getting my benefits, or I don't... Some man's coming to see me next week to fill up his benefit form. People just don't know their rights.
So you think that you've got the similar standing to your mother had in a sort of a modern way? Is that the kind of way?
I think so, yes.
Yes,
yes.
I mean,
still people
that award over there, I won a few years ago. The Borough Council and the newspapers want to get together and find the person who served the community best over the years. And I was voted, and I ran that rose bowl and the plaques on there for service. So I think it's something similar. And you see, when we were young, the other thing which would be interesting to this programme is the house had to be absolutely spotless before you left on a Saturday and went out, right? And I can always remember, you always had, by lunchtime, the boys had to do their bit and the girls had to do their bit, the house bit actually, and then you went out. But all our friends came to our house, always came to us before we went out. And the other thing is, my sister and I, depending on where we would go, would borrow each other's dresses.
I was going to get to family life. I mean, I was talking about your mother and the types of relationship you had with her. And you say you had a good relationship with your siblings. What was it like living with a stepfather, or did you never really think of him like that?
Never thought of him as a stepfather.
He
was just a father. He was just very quiet, because you had to be quiet with my mother, because there's always somebody who was having a go at, or we never had telephones in those days, you see, and people were calling. I remember one day...
Wasn't he deaf too?
He was partly... Oh yes, he was deaf. And one day, somebody came from the public assistance to see my mother about a lady up the road, and it was raining. I'll never forget this. And us children were sitting down in the passage, as we called in those, not the hall, just the passage, with it facing each other, and we just throwing an orange up and down and just playing, making our own games, we did no day. And this woman walked in, stepped over and walked into the kitchen. And my mother said, who the hell are you? And she said, oh, I'm from the public assistance, she said. I want to come to speak to you about Mrs. So-and-so. So my mother said, would you come with me, please? So she said to us children, out. Oh, we went out, we never argued, we went out, you see. So she went out, she said to the woman, I'm now going to close the door and you're going to knock. You're going to knock. So she slammed the door in her face, and the woman knocked, and my mother said, you tell me what you want and I'll tell you where you can come in. Don't you ever do that in this household again. I teach my children better manners than that.
Was there a strict kind of manners and behavioural code in the house?
Good manners was the main thing. I mean, I get uptight about people's manners and not saying thank you, not holding doors open, and good manners. I always on about good manners.
What were the sort of things that you were told to do as children?
Well, sit at a table, you don't, and our children was brought up this way, but you don't get up and walk away when you're finished. You wait till everybody's finished, or if you've got a special, you're asked to be excused. right? Hold your knife and fork properly. You're not out stabbing people like this. You cover up the knife, and things like that. And I think it was just good manners. And also, remember when you go out, if you find anything that isn't yours, it belongs to somebody else, so leave it alone. Right? You don't take in, it doesn't belong to you. Very strict on that. And just high standards, I suppose. But you never thought otherwise, because that was how you were taught.
Well, were other children taught in the same way? Do you think it was a kind of
Well, I lived in
standard?
East London, and I mean the most serious thing that I remember happening was two things. One, well, the general thing was a man standing on the corner taking bets, and somebody had a runner who would tell him if the police were coming. I mean, that was terribly bad, wasn't it? I mean, I don't want to bet. But children were allowed to go out and be free. I mean, as a child, I used to love looking at old buildings in London. I'd walk during the summer holiday. I would go around London, look at all the buildings. I won a competition for all the buildings in London. But when the fine weather was nice, I used to walk to Epping Forest, because we lived not far from Victoria Park. And what did I see on the grass? Keep off the grass. And I used to think to myself as a child, why have grass if I can't go on it? So I used to walk to Epping Forest. It was miles and miles, but I walked there just to be in the forest. So it was a freer life, because children were free. Children are not free anymore. We didn't have drugs, we didn't have ecstasy, we didn't have paedophiles. So the worst thing was a man on the street corner with bets. But there was an occasion when the man next door to us, I won't mention any names, he used to spend a lot of money on his dogs, to the detriment of the family meals. And my brother was very friendly with a chap of the same age next door. And this boy next door got fed up with his father treating his mother badly. So he threw the bottle of beer or wine out, and he filled it up with vinegar. When the old boy came home, you see, he went to drink this, and he was drinking vinegar, and he went berserk, and there was a battle, and there was a fight. And Jimmy actually hit him, and he came in, he said to my mother, I've hit him. And my mother said, oh God, she said, I'll hide you somewhere. And anyway, the police were called, and the police said to my mother, have you got... My mother said, you're accusing me of hiding something with my standards round here? And I don't know how she did it, we didn't come in. And we hid him for 3 weeks until it all died down, and then he went out again. And we never mentioned it. Never mentioned it.
It sounds like your house was very central of the whole sort of local community there.
It was a bit like here. People always coming here, you see. I mean, children, people coming in. I mean, I'm on lots of committees. And where my sister lives, and one sister's moved to Holt in Norfolk, and she's very happy there with her daughter and that. But my other sister and brother moved out to Sheringham. They stayed there about 3 years. They've now moved back to Chingford. And the house for them is full of people coming in again. And an incident happened that a few years ago now, I had a letter, because my brother Dennis had two brothers. There was, I can't remember, 2 brothers, and my brother used to go to the Air Cadets before the war. They're great friends. Or they all went into the Air Force and got separated. And then after the war, I had a letter saying it'd gone to the... I was probation officer, so this person wrote to the probation service, did they know where I was I retired? And they sent the letter to the pension people, and they posted on to me. And it was this friend asking me, because his brother, who was my brother Dennis's best friend, was dying, and he wanted to see our family. And so my sister was still in London at the time, and she put on a big party, and we all met these 2 boys, and we had a wonderful time. And he put in the letter, if this reaches you, Connie, we want to meet your family again. Do you remember when we shared everything during the war? We shared everything, including the bombs. And I can always remember your mother playing the piano. That was another thing. She wouldn't go down the shelter, because she said if the good Lord wanted her to be a rabbit, he would have made her a rabbit. So she wouldn't go down the shelter for anyone. And also she felt shelter was very unhealthy, so we stayed indoors. But she used to play the piano. And the louder the bombs fell, the louder she would play. And she'd tell all those neighbours who didn't want to go down to her, we've got to defeat this Hitler. And play the piano loudly, and she would play and sing. And this one, then I've got the letter still here, where he said, where we shared everything, including the music and the bombs. And you know, if somebody came home from the war, say my brother Dennis brought someone over from the Navy, And Mum said, oh, we've got plenty of rations, looking after children. Yes, you can have egg and bacon, what you like. And I remember my younger sister saying, I always remember that. She said, it was my turn to have egg for breakfast. And this went to this naval chap who came home with Dennis. So there was, and also, you see, we lived in a very Jewish community. And there was no problems. I mean, what's the hassle? Whether you're Jew, Gentile, black or white, I don't see any problem. All I'm interested in, people are good and people are not so good. This society would be wonderful if we all could live together without drugs and in peace and care for our children. That's what we've got to look at these days. This is where we've gone wrong.
Going back to your childhood, what was your daily routine like in the house? You said that music was very important to you. And
church. Lived in the church. Oh yes, we used to go around to the Haggerston Central Methodist Church where we all worshipped. And you go around there to guides. And then I used to go and help in the cubs. Eventually I became the cub master, go to Christian Endeavour. I went to church Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, Sunday evenings. We just lived in the church, absolutely.
It was very central to your life,
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it was a wonderful church. I mean, everybody was very friendly, very nice. In fact, somebody rang me yesterday, tea time. She's now, unfortunately, that church is closed. It's become a Seventh-day Adventist church. And so my friends have now moved to Wesley's Chapel, which is the Chapel of Methodism in City Road. And she rang me to say, are you still at the same address? Is everything okay? I'm so happy in this Methodist church. And do you know that little church there in that part of East London, all the youngsters, it was a full church, lots of young people, just like yourself, going there every Sunday. We had a dance once a month. It was wonderful. It was a central life for everyone.
So what was the sort of things that you ended up doing there? You say that there was a dance. What was
there? There was a dance. There was meetings. There was a bit of a choir. But you just went down there. If you want to go down, have a cup of tea, just find somebody else down there to talk to. And there was lots of boyfriends of our own age down there. And most of the people there fulfilled their potential. It was a very bit of a tough area. But because of that church, and when the minister of that church died earlier this year, people came from all over Britain he was moved into Elmside, which is a Methodist home for the aged in Hitchin, and they all came to his funeral because he was very beloved, and they've all done very well. And that the churches there was a centre where people could go. And at one time, many years ago when I was quite young, they used to have their mother and baby clinic there. And things like that, because it wasn't a health service. The church would provide the premises and nurses used to come in. Yes. And the other thing about not having a health service, I can remember our local doctors was in a shop, and the shop part was the waiting room, the sitting room part was the doctor's surgery, and the kitchen was where his wife dispensed medicine. It was £6 a visit. But we didn't go there very often. But if we were seriously, like I was one day, my mother would take us to the one hospital which she loved, which was now called the Royal London. And I went there, and I was operated by the same surgeon who operated on King George V, and we didn't pay a penny. But my mother would then go to the hospital and say, I think my child is seriously ill, and they would take you and see you. But you see, in other parts of the country, like Wales, where my husband was brought up, you never had that because we would happen to be in London.
Not until I'm now in Bevan's day.
Yeah, well, yes, but you know, so there were things going. But the church was our centre of our life. And when I was 12, I remember I put on my first concert, and Charles Children helped me to come in, and I think I raised about £1.
What was that? What was the concert?
Well, just children singing, dancing, and doing things and tumbling, and people doing overhead stands and things like that. Yeah, we made our own amusement. You know, it was didn't have television. We had a gramophone. We had lots of records. My mother used to go and tell. In fact, I still got a lot of the 78s upstairs.
Do you think that the centre of the community being the church has really changed dramatically over the years?
Oh, I think so. I don't always think it's the public's fault. I think it's the church's fault. I think maybe a lot of the churches haven't looked at what people need today. I mean, life's changed. I mean, I remember in our area in London, in Hackney, all these shops closed on a Thursday afternoon, right? And there certainly wasn't any shopping on a Sunday. Now, shops are open all hours, all day Sundays. Now, where do people get the time to go to church? Maybe they need something, but maybe now You see people now, you may have one, they walk about with, they're off the telephone, right? If the boss says they've got to work late, they have to work late. They want to shop all night, they shop all night. Where does a person these days stop to think who they are? What kind of person are they? We're all different. Who are you? I don't know. You're sitting here interviewing me, looking quite pretty, you've got a nice smile, but who are you? Do you know who you are? Do you know really who the kind of person you are? What your feelings are?
Do you think this was the guidance that you had as a child that sort of shaped your life in the church?
Oh, very much. I mean, very, very much so. I mean, my mother would never play anything else but hymns or ballads, Christian ballads, on the Sunday, yes, on the piano. And we had to, we brought up in as chapel folk, and it was there, and it's with you. I mean, you go out and you help someone. And this was we were brought up, if there was a need, you do it. And if there's an injustice, my goodness, you had to fight injustices.
And that was both with your mother and with the church. It was the same kind of
Same thing, yes. I mean, when I was old enough, I became an arcala, which is the cub master, and I had them. And it was a closed pack, which means it was a Methodist pack. But when the war came and children were evacuated, I didn't have so many children, but there were some Jewish children out there who weren't evacuated, and there were some Catholics who weren't evacuated. So I made an open pack, so I took all the children in. But one day I suddenly realised I was failing in my duty as a cub master, because a little boy came to me and said, Kayla, I bought you a present. And I said, oh darling, you don't have to buy me any presents. He said, well, I wanted to. And I said, oh, it's lovely, it's a compact. I think I've still got it somewhere upstairs. And I said, well, you really shouldn't spend your money on me. So I didn't spend my money on it. I pinched off Cheap Jack down the market. And I thought, Connie, he's gone out pinching something for you. You've not really got your message across in the Scout movement that you don't steal. So,
when you were younger, you say that you went to dances, and probably when you were a bit older, but you went to sort of concerts and things like that.
Yes.
What was the atmosphere like there? Was that sort of the thing that most of the community children got involved with?
Yes, I think you had your own friends, you see, and mainly chapel. All my friends that I've got still are chapel folk. They're from those days, they're still there. And we either used to go to the cinema. I used to like the cinema a lot. Only special films I used to like. I used to go to the Standard. And I remember one day I'd met a friend at a bus stop, Guy Clattenbrock, who to me, it was one of the greatest men, a wonderful man, that's another story. And I met him at a bus stop with my first aid box, because I was in the Red Cross then. I've dumped a bit now, but I'm in the Red Cross in the war. And he said to me, where are you going? I said, well, I've been out to a really bad bomb and I'm trying to get home. And he said, well, I live at Oxford House. And I said, well, I know Oxford House very well. He said, well, come and have supper with me. And I thought, this man is absolutely marvellous. And my mother couldn't stand people educated at Oxford and Cambridge coming down telling how the poor how to live. So I used to say to Mum, you must come and meet this man at Oxford House. He's a new man there, he's wonderful. They're all the same, they come down here telling the poor how to live and they haven't got a clue. And I said, Mother, he's different. And then one day she said to me, George Raff is at the Troxy. George Raff, the film star's at the Troxy, and she loved George Raff. Would you come to me, because we're going over to Bethnal Green? She always be, where are we going to Bethnal Green? Would you come with me? And I said, only if you'll come meet Guy Clattenbrock. I'll make a bargain with you. I'll come to the Troxy with you if you come and meet Guy Clattenbrock. And I could see her waving and George Raft rang one. So I went to her to the Troxy and then we went to meet Guy Clattenbrock. And when she came home, we were walking home and I said, well, what do you think of this man Guy? Not bad, not bad. Well, that was praise indeed. And after that, she followed this man as I did. That's another story, but he was really a great man. He had a great effect on my life. He filled in the gaps for me. Wonderful man. Was going to be a priest, but in fact he became the senior chief probation officer for London, and he also was in the Borstal. And then he went out, and because he felt after the war there was going to be a lot of injustices between the Third World and the West, that he went out to Southern Rhodesia to start a multiracial farm. And a lot of my friends who were school teachers went out, and I said, Guy, I can't come out with you. I'm a probation officer. And it looks insulting to go out to a country and say you're expecting crime. So I was the anchor woman here. And when Ian Smith started he imprisoned Guy, he imprisoned the joint chairman, a man called Didymus Mutaza, who became the Speaker of the House of Assembly. And I got them all out of prison. This is why Steve is linked with Zimbabwe. But that man was wonderful. And my mother actually admitted in the end he was different. He was different, which was quite nice. Yeah, very quite nice.
What was it like at your going back to your childhood again? What was it like in the evenings, and what sort of things did you do? You say music was very important.
Guys, Christian Endeavour, Band of Hope, something that I still don't drink, Band of Hope, and things like that started. He's going to tell you something funny about me, but do you want me to tell it now?
Okay, tell her.
Well, I tell everybody that I still don't drink, but she lectured at the London School of Economics, and there was a very nice professor there called Professor Brian Abel Smith, charming man. He was always very charming to me. And he invited us over to a meal at his house. It was very charming, over in Chelsea. And when I arrived, it was a very hot day. I'd gone down on the train, and we'd gone over to Chelsea, and I was very hot. And when I got there, very charming, Professor Abel Smith said, "Connie, do have a drink." And it was a tray with little plastic glasses and little white bubbles on the top. So I thought, oh, lemonade, just, I didn't think it was anything else. So I knocked it back. And he said, "You are thirsty, my dear." I said, "Brian, I'm so thirsty and hot." He said, "Have another." So I knocked that straight back. Hugh said to me, "Do you know what you're drinking?" I said, "No, but it's the best lemonade I've ever tasted." He said, "You're knocking back champagne by the glassful." And I didn't know it was champagne because it was in plastic glasses with bubbles. And I said, "This is the best lemonade I've ever tasted." And it turned out I had 2 glasses of champagne, and I lost the belt of my coat on the way home.
Did it go straight? I bet it went straight to your head. I bet it did.
So, but I mean, yes. So you went to the Band of Hope, Christian Endeavour, Guides. Then when we left the Guide, we went into Rangers. And when you left the Rangers in those days, they're called Venture Scouts and Guides. Now it's called Cadets, training to be an officer for the movement. And then when you came home, it was piano, organ, or whatever.
Did you play yourself?
No, my mother wouldn't teach any of us to play. The others play the organ or the squeeze box, as we called it, and things like that. But I had singing lessons, and I was taught to sing because she wanted to accompany me, but she didn't want us on the piano because that was her role, to play the piano. And she would sometimes just stop what she was doing and go and play the piano. And she'd call me in to sing, and I've got a lot of my music upstairs going back to 1890, ballads.
What were the sort of things you sang?
Oh, Because, My Task, Christian ballads.
Come to the garden, Lord.
Coming to the garden, Lord, Sanctuary of the Heart, you see. Yes. But the other thing is, she was a great one for discussions, and even now, I mean, when I first took you home and you came to meet my family, I think he thought we were all quarrelling, but we weren't. We were all having discussions about everything, and we still do.
Yes,
when we go down
I had one. I just came in the door.
when we go down, we went last week to see my brother, and as soon as we got in, they had coffee, and Stanley was on to shoot about the Common Market. What else was he shoot?
Oh dear, yes.
Common Market. Oh, the Livingston, Ken Livingston in London.
Oh, yes, Ken Livingstone, and what's Tony Blair doing, hobnobbing with the Liberal Democrats?
Yeah, and we had it all. And from the time Paul Shoe got in there, and the whole family's like that, see. Because that's our way of life.
What were the sort of things you used to talk about with your mother? Was it politics?
Church politics. What do the local authorities think they're doing? Why do they treat people like this? Life wasn't meant to be like this for the poor. And in the war, it was Hitler, injustices. Why do people have to go and live underground? Oh, the other thing she used to do, and my sister reminded me of this, my younger sister, she said that, you remember when Mum used to go around and help people if they were pregnant? Well, during the war, a woman went into labour, and the RP man came round and said, "Smithy, the woman's having a baby and the midwife can't get it because of the bombs. Could you possibly come round?" And my sister said it was some kind of jeep. I wasn't in, I must have been out somewhere else. And the jeep came round, some kind of jeep or van. And my sister and my mother went to this woman's house. My mother delivered the baby because there wasn't a midwife. And that's just how things were.
You said that she was very concerned with the poor. Were you considered a slightly more wealthy family?
I think we weren't I don't think we were any wealthier, but I think we were more cultured. I say that, I don't think that I'm being nasty on this one, but we were taught to read poetry, have music, we were chapel folk, and my mother could write a good letter and she could argue a toss, it doesn't matter who they were, she would stand her ground and she wouldn't move. And it's like this woman when she came in and walked in without knocking, my mother was furious, didn't like things like that at all. And the other thing is, she wouldn't have any of us vaccinated. She didn't think any of us would have cow dung in us. So she said the good Lord would look after us, see. And in those days, against the law, you had to be vaccinated. And I still to this day don't know why. They sent the local Sisters of Mercy from the High Anglican Church round the corner to see my mother, to persuade her to have the children vaccinated. My mother said to her, "You've come to see me, you must be a Christian." She said, "Yes, do you believe in God?" So she said, "Oh yes." Her mother said, "So do I. So I'm trusting in the good Lord," and you go back and tell them that. And she said, "And what's more," she said, "you know, you Sisters of Mercy do good work round here, but would you come dressed in something other than black and white?" She said, "People's lives round here are miserable enough without you coming around all dressed in black and white." She said, "Why don't you come round in a few bright colours?"
What kind of response did she get?
She just, you know, they're very gracious and very smart, and went on. And none of us were vaccinated until I went into the probation service. They were shocked I'd never been vaccinated, so I had to be vaccinated. My mother was appalled I was even vaccinated then.
You obviously, well, you say you were close to your mother, and your mother was involved in lots of community work. Did you get involved with her?
Only if I had to go somewhere important. Like, I mean, I didn't. My younger sister went round with her because I was nursing. But I mean, maybe if you wanted to go and see somebody in the next road about something. But mainly, it wasn't locally I went with her because we were told to stay at home. It was when she went to see someone like in Scotland Yard or at the town hall or over somewhere in Kingsland Road where she had to go and see people for the public assistant. At that level, as the eldest daughter, I was taken. But in other people's houses, I was never taken. She would go there alone, but she would come back and complain to us about the injustices of society.
So how did you get involved in that kind of thing?
I don't know. I mean, I can only think that if I see anything now, I react. It's a normal reaction. If there's an injustice, I mean, many years ago now, a woman fell down in the town centre, in where the bus station is now. And I just, and although I've got a stick, I went out and I started to help her out. I couldn't help myself. Anyway, in the end, she didn't want an ambulance, so I said, all right, so I called a taxi and I took her home. And I stayed friendly with that lady for a long time. She joined the Methodist Church. I got her moved to another house and she recently died. But I couldn't help myself. I mean, I see things on the television, I hear things on the radio, and I think that's not fair, that's not right.
When you were younger then, you were involved in it all, but you say you became a Red Cross nurse.
In the Blitz.
Was that the first time you really got involved in it in a professional sense?
Yes, I think so. I think that...
How did that come about?
Well, I joined the Red Cross anyway before the war, and I used to go and spend so many days in the Prince of Wales Hospital, because in those days I belonged to the Tottenham detachment with my friend, because she lived in Tottenham, so we joined the Tottenham detachment. Very nice. I used to go to the hospital 3 evenings a week and do Red Cross work, which was quite nice to go and sit with patients, maybe help to feed, and we could do that in these hospitals these days because we were voluntary. But the funny thing was, you were never allowed to go on the private ward, ever. There was a very funny incident because I was passing the private ward one day and someone called out, "Connie!" And I looked up and it was our senior steward of our Methodist Church wife in the bed, in the private ward, because they were quite wealthy compared with the rest of us. And I hesitated to go. He said, "Well, come on in." So I went in, we talked about the chapel and the church meeting. She used to run the women's fellowship, this woman, talking about the church. And suddenly the sister came over to me, "Ness, what are you doing in there?" And I said to her, "Well, Mrs. Baker," nobody would argue with Mrs. Baker. She just said, "I invited her in, she's my friend and she stays. Now I'm in a private ward and I'm paying." Quite all right. And I was allowed to stay there, you see. So, I mean, there were the divisions, you see. Why can I pop and say something to a woman in a private ward? So what? You know. But that was it. And then when the war started, I remember it, September the 3rd, 1939, 11 o'clock, where was I? In my little Methodist church. The minister said that the war started. He said a prayer and we all went home. And then after, I changed my detachment from Tottenham to Dalston in Hackney. And I joined the Red Cross. And it was some very funny incidences there. And I was going all over the place as a Red Cross nurse. And fortunately, I've never needed very much sleep. And you didn't get very much in the Blitz.
So what was it actually like? What were the sort of things that happened? Well,
for the first part of the war, it was very quiet. Children were evacuated, and then gradually they came back again. And then, of course, I can tell you when the Battle of Britain started. September the 7th, 1940, at 5 o'clock. Because I was 21 on the 6th of September 1940, and my friend came round to call for me. We're going out to celebrate my birthday. We got partly across the fields, right, and the sirens went, and the bombs started dropping. And she went all the way home, and I came home, and I never did have a 21st birthday party. That was the end of it. That was the end of it. And from then on, one went on, and I mean, I suddenly realised that there was going to be perhaps a lot of bombing. So immediately I thought I'd go round, so I went round to all the houses, and I collected money, and people trusted me. Oh, you're Smithy's daughter, aren't you, Connie? I said, oh yes. Oh yeah, I don't mind paying you money. And what I did, I bought a lot of first aid, and I planted all different places all over. So that one part got bombed, I had a lot of first aid in another part. And that came in very handy. And there were occasions, I remember when the bombs was dropping, and a no-name, no pact, there was a Jewish man opposite. And he was very excited when he came all over. And he was telling me his leg had been blown off. And it hadn't been blown off. It wasn't any blood. In his exam, he put 2 legs in one trouser leg. And because she had one trouser leg and a bad leg, they thought he lost a leg. And then another time, I was on the bus coming down by Graham Road, I think it was, in Hackney. And there's a blast. We got it, the whole bus shook. And I was sitting here on the bus, and his dad was sitting, the little boy was sitting there about 12. And I said to him, you all right, son? Are you all right? And suddenly he screamed, he'd gone deaf. And I had to get him off into some first aid place quickly. And then when I eventually got home to Hackney Wick, my mother was there. She'd heard there was this bomb. And she went off at me. Why are you late home, she said. There's been a bomb. And I said, because there's been a bomb, Mother, that's why I'm late home, you know. And this is how we used to speak to them. I mean, you know.
What were the sorts of other things you saw? Did you see much tragedy?
Yes. I mean, I remember once another funny incident was, just about 2 streets away, a bomb had fallen, and there was in a sort of church hall. These people were there, and I was helping them, and I'd run out of first aid. And I said to someone, go round to my house and tell my sister, get this other first aid, and told her exactly where to go and pick it. Or someone bring it round. Well, she came round with it. And Hilda, bless her, could never stand the sight of blood or anything. She came in, she looked at all these bodies, there's all this blood everywhere. And she went, oh, and she fainted. At that time, the ambulance came out to pick up the unconscious bodies, including her, who wasn't injured. And she woke up in the ambulance and told them she only fainted at the sight of blood, she wasn't really injured. But what we were doing then, the doctors were sort of injecting people and giving me a label, and I had to stick it, pin it onto them and say which injection they'd had, and trying to calm them down. Some were screaming and saying, where's my child? And things like this. Very, very sad.
I can also tell them about Fred's wife.
Oh yes, our minister. Later on, that wasn't in the Battle of the Blitz, it was the later bombing. She was in the Dalston Junction sub-library with some Sunday school children, actually. That minister's wife got a direct hit. And neither she nor the children were found. And Fred was so marvellous. People being bombed right, left and centre. There was his minister, this Methodist minister, out there, despite his own grieving, with people. And then my other 2 friends, Jean Bradstreet and her brother, the mother said to him, look, you stay in the shelter in the garden. I'll go in the house and make some tea and coffee. Tea and sandwiches, not coffee. And the shelter got the direct hit. And I never found anything of the children at all. I lost 6 girlfriends in the Blitz. And I get very cross about this. And I also like to say this, you see, recently, not due to the Blitz, but St Ethelburger Church was bombed for the IRA bomb. Now, I had a soft spot for that church. Well, that was a church, not a Methodist chapel. When I used to go up to pay the rent for our house in the city, I used to wander around, and when I wanted a rest, I used to go and sit in St Ethelburger Church. And I used to think, oh, it's a nice little church. We haven't got anything like this in our little chapel. Of course, it had different things in it. And I felt there's another part of my life gone. Now, I've had some ideas about that. Why can't they rebuild? When they rebuild, I hope they do St Ethelburger Church. Do you know all the people who died in the Blitz in London, all the people who were injured, lost their homes? There isn't anything down there, any monument to say to these people who stood firm in the Blitz. For all that, they went to work, they came home. There isn't anything for them. Then why cannot we have in that St Ethelburger Church just a small plaque? Because St Ethelburger Church is twixt between the city and the East End. So you could get money from the city, and there's the East End, could have a plaque on the wall. in memory of those who died in the Blitz.
Do you think a lot of people have been forgotten?
Oh, absolutely, in London. Absolutely. I'm sorry. I feel very strongly about it. And what I want to do is I'm a great one for young people these days. I think we should raise money, and each year 2 or 3 youngsters should be given a grant to go abroad in the name of peace as part of the rebuilding of the St Ethelburger Church. And in memory of the people who died in the Blitz, there should be a foundation set up in memory of those people to give grants to young people to go abroad in the service of peace. There isn't anything.
Do you think that not enough emphasis is put on remembering people that have died? Do you think that the services, in the 11th are still important in that way?
I think it's important for people to remember, yes, because part of remembering isn't only to remember those that died. I'm a great believer that we were there, here we are, and where are we going? Okay, we had the war. We had November the 11th, which was peace. But where are we going? Are we learning for that? If it means that young people today remember what a terrible tragedy it was and how young people's lives were lost, maybe there won't be any more wars. It's got to be a useful thing, this memory. It's got to be useful. And one of the things we could do for Londoners is to have a small plaque, raise money and give grants for people to go abroad in service of peace. And at least out of that terrible tragedy of war will come something for young people. Well, they've been forgotten, the Londoners, I'm sorry. I feel very strongly about it.
You obviously, as a Red Cross nurse, were involved in sort of work like that. How has that carried on in your life after the war?
Well, what happened after the war, I went to university and studied social science. I went to Nottingham. And then I did the probation officer's course and became a probation officer in South London.
Was that based on the fact that you wanted to help in justice? Was that how it happened?
It was just that I just want to be there. I can't help myself. If there's people in trouble, I need to be there.
Was that a very unusual thing to study for, being a
Well,
woman?
no, that came about because my nice man, Guy Clapham Block,
Uh-huh.
he was a very good man, and I used to go and have supper with him at Oxford House. And he said to me one day, "What are you going to do after the war, Connie?" And I said, Guy, I don't know what I'm going to do after the war. I can't think. I want to do something nice, something decent and honourable, yes." And he'd been in probation, so he said to me, "What about going into probation?" Well, I hadn't really thought of that. And he said, "Well, would you like to?" And I said, "I've often thought why. Some people grow up in families where one goes wrong and the other are all good, and yet they've got the same atmosphere." And he said, "Well, have a go." And so when the war's over, I put in, just before the war ended, I wrote to the Home Office at Guy's recommendation, and they were offering 2 grants, you can call them scholarships, one north and one south, to get everything fully paid to train as a probationer, and I got it. I got that. So everything I had was paid for. And then I went on the probation course after leaving university. I was a probation officer in the Lambeth Juvenile Court in South London.
Was it unusual as a girl? Was it an unusual profession for a woman?
No, I don't think so. I think so. Because in those days, probation officers had children up to 13. You could only take boys up to 13, girls obviously much older. And so they needed women to be with these younger boys.
So what did your job entail? What did you do?
I was in the South London Juvenile Court, and then I got a transfer for standing out for injustices. I got moved to East London Juvenile Court. I don't know, so put it on there. I got moved to East London Juvenile Court, and that's where I met Hugh. And I again had youngsters. And
what were the types of things that were dealt with then? Was it like a juvenile
school attendance, attendance orders, children on probation for stealing. And one case I had was a woman with a baby who was a prostitute, and they wondered whether I should take the baby back to Ireland. I went to visit her in prison in Holloway. And that's another funny thing. Recently I went to Crete, and my husband went off too, because he was in Crete for some time. He went off, and I was with my sisters in the hotel. And I kept saying to my sisters, "I know that lady over there." I said, "I can't think where." And in the end, my sister said, "Oh, call over to her." And I said, "I'm in a hotel." So my sister shouted out, "My sister thinks she knows you." And this woman turned around and said, "Oh, have you ever been in Holloway Prison? And I said, oh yes, several times, you see, to the gasp of the other people having breakfast. And she was the Deputy Governor of Holloway, and of course I met her as a probation officer going in and out, you see, so...
Thought you were a hardened criminal, but
anyway. But,
what was it like inside a prison then? What was the...
I think for me, even in those days, I felt clanging the door after you. I can still hear those keys going in and being locked. I think, I don't know, just hearing those clicks going in, and then you go from there's another click, you see, and seeing people and thinking, well, why are they here, you know? And even today, when you think of people going to being on the outside now, people in prison for much minor things in those days. I'll give you an instance.
That'd be the clock then. What a fantastic clock that is.
You figure out.
And then the other thing was that...
You've given me an instance of inside the prison.
Yeah, I said, yes, there was a prison which I'm really keen on, but there was an instance in court, you see, and I was doing very well with this girl who was being a bit naughty. Her mother had gone off and left her, and she had no one had been brought up by her grandmother. And I was doing okay with her, and I was on holiday, and when I came back, I noticed her name on the court list. And I thought, oh no, I just don't want anything. I don't want to go into a probation hostel. I'm getting along with her okay. And so I said to the policewoman in the court, why is she up? She said she was standing on the corner of Piccadilly Circus wearing long drop earrings. And I thought, oh, you know. Anyway, we had a court then, and there was Sir Basil Enriquez on the bench, Miss Moses, and Lady Cynthia Colville, Queen Mary's lady in waiting. And guess what? She had long drop earrings. See, I thought, Connie, you're okay here, girl. So they asked me if the probationer got anything to say. And I said, yes. I said I was getting quite well, mentioning this young lady's name. And I would be sorry if our relationship could be broken now. And I said, I don't quite see why she's been charged. I said, I don't think it's an offence to stand on the corner of Piccadilly Circus. I've often stood there waiting for a friend. And I said, as for wearing long drop earrings, Lady Cynthia Colville's got long drop earrings. Is there anything wrong with long drop earrings? Case dismissed. So, I mean, you had to work, you know, yeah. And I liked it. I liked to feel that one was just there. And we used to say the probation service in those days was so marvellous. You could go anywhere in England and knock on the door of the probation office and you would be welcomed, very welcomed. And Sir Basil Enriquez was a very great magistrate in East London. In fact, when we got engaged, our senior officer said to us, you really better go and see Basil. He'd want to know about this. When we went to see Basil, he said to Hugh, how comes you two are together? She does Stepney and you do Poplar. And Hugh said, well, yes, but Burdett Road, one side of Burdett Road is Poplar and the other side is Stepney. Ah, said Sir Basil, blessed Burdett Road then, you see. And it was the courts were different, the probation service was different. And
how were the courts different?
Well, I think East London Juvenile Court was different.
Yeah,
from
the other courts. I mean, Sir Basil made it different. He was definitely there, and he was definitely in charge. And I remember one girl, and I can say this to you because there was a reporter who used to be there reporting cases, and she had a very silk dress on, and every now and again she used to slip down off the chair. And in the end, Sir Basil went nearly mad. He said, if you cannot wear a dress that you can sit on without falling, don't come to court at all. And when we got married, Sir Basil came, Lady Cynthia Colville came to us, and even the cleaner from the Oxford House came. They were all together.
Oh, that's me, Mike. It's all right.
And we were all together. And
now, Basil thought it was his personal family at court. You see.
Yes.
I mean, he was the chairman. He wouldn't start the court until everybody was there. He used to say, where are my probation officers? And he wouldn't start till we're all sitting down in front of him. And then the clerk to the justices, the police are all part of Basil's court. That's what it was for.
Yeah.
And he used to play pop. He didn't like to play the LCC or anything like that.
No,
He used to carry on alarming about the LCC.
So, yes, I mean, I just felt My life, all along, looking back, the whole thing about it, the good manners, honesty, helping people, the Methodist Church, I must say that, the Methodist Church and its outreach, has all led me into a direction. And I think, with me, it's sort of instinct and the feeling, and I feel that this may sound, I don't know, pompous or something, but I really feel that I'm called, because I'm a Methodist and a Christian, and I try to do my best. But sometimes I feel deeply inside me, especially as I get older, that I've got certain gifts and I'm called to use these gifts. I've only got to go in Tesco's. I was in there the other day as a little child. It was in a pram. It looked round, it smiled at me, it pulled my hand, pulled me over to it. And as you were telling, I'm like a magnet to children. They somehow like me nowadays. I suppose I'm like someone's cuddly grandmother. But it's there. And I think because children think I give them time.
What are the types of examples now that you have relationships with children?
My young carers. I mean, they don't see me as chairman or president. They see me as Connie. When I go to some of their do's, I'm sitting there, or they're sitting, they put their arms around me, they cuddle me.
Now this is something you're very involved with now, isn't it?
Apart from the MS, they're my two big things, multiple sclerosis. I'm welfare officer of the MS. But also a few years ago, I've been welfare officer for the MS for 25 years. And a few years ago, a young girl of 14, her mother got MS and she was very, very ill. And she became a carer. She didn't know she was a carer, but she was caring for her mother in those days. And I used to go around and say to her, look, why don't you go out and be young? You're only 14, I'll stay with your mother, I'll help you and get you some help. And when she married about nearly 5 years ago, she came to me with her husband and said, you helped me so much when I was young. Why don't you start a scheme helping all these youngsters? And I said, mentioning her name, I said, I'm getting old, I'm running down. Oh, but you can do it, you know everybody in Stevenage. Well, I knew 7 youngsters whose parents had MS. I said, okay, but I said, I will not have a drop-in centre for children. I think that's condescending and wrong. They want the same life as an all-new child. And to say you've got to go along and play with pool or whatever is quite wrong. They might not want to play pool. And also, I felt we needed to have someone to be a friend to that child. So I had a piece in the paper, and I got a lot of young people like yourself interviewed, checked out by police, which is a must, checked out by social services, asked what your interests are, and match them to the child, introduce you to the family, and we raise our money and you take the child out. It's what the child wants to do. Bowling, going to watch a football match, going to a theme park, fun, whatever. And in the end, social services rang me and said, would you take them all on, Connie? And I said, all of them? They said, well, children whose parents are very ill with cancer, arthritis. We now have 35 children, and we're still looking for more young people now to take them out. And we take them from 8 to 16, but we're now thinking of lowering our age to 6, because we try to instill in these children good habits. When they get to 12, these children think they're the only ones who can look after their parent, mainly their mother. They know where a medication is, they know how to apply the medication. They won't go to school, and they don't want social services coming in. We have to get rid of that, or we don't want them even to start that. So we start now at 8, and they get so used to going out having a good time. In fact, they ring me up and say, could we have a Halloween party? Can we do this? So we've got 35 children. We recently won the nationwide award for the best voluntary endeavour, best voluntary organisation in the whole of this region. We got this trophy outside and £100.
Do you think it's made a difference?
Oh, made a difference. I've had children knocking on the door asking if they can join my scheme. And I had one little boy and I said, is your mum or dad ill, darling? My dad's out of work, would that help? And I said, no, I'm sorry, your mum or dad's got to be ill. Another boy knocked on the door and he said, can I join? And I said, well, is your mum or dad? He said, no, I sit in with my gran once a month, would that help? Our children are having such a good time, other children want to join. So we know we're successful.
Do you think there's a big gap in healthcare now in that way? Because obviously healthcare has changed from the days that you described with your mother.
It's brilliant. I go to the Health Service Committee. I'm on the Stevenage Health Committee. Sure, and I go to the meetings of the Health Authority. I'm there hoping to play quite a big part in the new primary care groups. And it has changed, thank God, for the better. But you see, the problem is that when you get a new government in, people's expectations raise. The expectations are high, but unfortunately the delivery is good, but it's not matching the expectation. And this is where the gap is at the moment. People are expecting a lot more, but the delivery is quite reaching that expectation.
So what do you think the problems are with the health service as you see it now?
I think a lot of it is on physical disability has a low profile, and I'm trying to remedy this. I mean, obviously mental health is very high on the priority, it has to be. Learning difficulties has to be. And people who want heart operations, there has to be. But because of this, and the other thing, in social services, elderly and disabled are put together. So if you get older people coming out of hospital, want to go into nursing homes, social services have got to pay for them out of their budget. There's very little left for physical disability. So I've now recently written a report which I've sent round to various organisations, and I've had several meetings with the hospital asking for £50,000 to come out of locality planning, JCC money for 3 years to get a pilot scheme at the Lister where anyone with anything to do with MS, instead of waiting 6-7 weeks to see a neurologist, waiting for physio, waiting for this to happen, we've got a neurologically trained nurse in place, part-time physio, part-time occupational therapist, speech therapist. And if you're going into an MS relapse, and I know all about this, you don't want to wait for help. The whole family's under stress. The opposite spouse is under stress. The young carers are under stress. Whereas with this scheme, you ring in, the nurse will come to see you, invite you to come along, and she will access you immediately to help. So everything goes on an upward spiral, and I should know within the next 2 weeks whether I've got this money to start this scheme. But that, I think, physical disability is the gap, and that's no fault of health service, they haven't got the money.
You say the health service was obviously there is a health service, there wasn't when you were younger.
That's right.
And it's obviously changed throughout the years. What sort of stage do you think it's at now?
What, the health service, what stage? That's a difficult question. I think it's at a stage where it has to, I mean, some of the questions people are asking the health authority, like that little girl who was ill a couple of years ago, they'd already spent a lot of money, it was going to spend another $75,000 to help her to have some more chemotherapy or some help. And the health authority was saying they couldn't afford it and she was dying anyway. But somebody came along in the voluntary sector and paid for it, but she still died a month later. I'm not God, I can't answer these questions. I mean, if it was my child or somebody else's child, I would want everything done for that child. And then people say, well, we could have had 3 knee replacements for that. We could have done this with that. We could have employed a couple of more physiotherapists for that. Is the health authority, is they got a never-ending purse?
Do you think there should be more money available for healthcare?
I think there should be money down, and this may happen in the new primary care, which is coming out next April the 1st, when primary care doctor budget fund holding is finishing. Maybe there would be more money then for looking at after all, primary care, according to my dictionary, is earliest first beginning. And so you're looking at the beginning of things, and maybe we could have some more well-trained community physiotherapists. And the other thing we're desperately needing, and I put this to the health authority, is that we have very little family therapists. And I said to some doctors recently, you get a child coming to you with headaches and stomachache, you can't find anything wrong. Of course you cannot, because what is wrong with that family? The family's become fractured, absolutely fractured. And the child is worried about the family situation, not a headache or tummy ache. What we need, especially my young carers, what they have to put up with is dreadful. What they need is a really well-trained, and I use the word well-trained, family therapists. Get them from the Tavistock Clinic or somewhere, get them trained by there, but get those family therapists in. And then you would take a lot of load off doctors. Because the family needs to be rekindled. Rekindled. There isn't anything greater than a family. If you get that unit okay, I think everything else will fall into place.
Do you think that's one of the greatest changes you've seen through the century, is the way that the family's changed?
I still think there's a lot of families together, but mobility has changed it. I used to live in Hackney, out down one road and out down another road, and your neighbours were there. Nowadays, everybody's mobile. I mean, yourself, you moved home, you're here, you work near home, you're married and you live near home. I mean, it's in my book we've written about Stevenage. When I came to Stevenage, my mother thought I was emigrating. She said, what do you want to go live in Stevenage for? I mean, what's wrong with Hackney? So I think the problem is today, because of work, people are moving, they're more mobile, and therefore you haven't got your sister around the corner, your brother, your auntie to come in and give a hand. Whereas years ago they were there to help. So the extended family is gone. The family relationships could be there. In some families they're not, but most of them are. But they're The distance is there. And the other problem is the hours that people work. I thought, this is another bee in my bonnet. What right have people to say that people go to work and they've got to work to 9 o'clock at night and they've got to work weekends? It's quite wrong. I mean, I deplore this in America, that in America you don't just give a person a job, you take over their soul. No one has a right to do that. You give them a certain amount of money and you should have fixed hours. There's a certain amount of loyalty to your employer, but your employer doesn't own you. And if you notice, you're not personnel officers anymore, you're human resource officers. I would never be a human resource for anyone. I'm me. If someone wants to employ me, they pay me a salary and I work hard, but I'm not a human resource. And the sooner we get back to personnel officers and treating the worker responsibly, okay. But I think that's where the problem is at the moment with families. They're working too long hours, far too long, and they say people's life is suddenly...
There's plenty of grandmas and grandpas around the town pushing kids.
Yeah, that's another thing, Steve. Parents are allowed to work around Stevenage, and of course this is the extended... Now that's a good point here in the new town, fortunately. They allowed grandparents to come in to Stevenage many years ago, and they're here now. And what's happening, the young people are out to work, and you go around Stevenage, you see the grandparents pushing the prams and looking after the children. So we've still got that in the new town, but I don't see it everywhere. But I still think it brings me back to the hours that people work. I mean, several of my befrienders have left because their hours of work changed. They've been told they've got to work weekends and they can't do anything about it. Very sad, very sad. I'd be unemployable these days.
Moving on to actually Stevenage, I was going to ask you about that. You obviously, your roots were very much in London and your childhood was in London. Yeah. What made you move here?
House. When we got married, the first thing I did when I got married was go and put my name down on the housing.
No, before that.
Oh yes, so when I got engaged.
When you got engaged, she went round and put our name on the housing list.
Housing list. So, because when I was at university, I did my dissertation on housing, difficulties of housing, and slum clearance, and sociology of housing. Anyway, so my name was on the housing list. When we got married, it was funny enough. Soon after, we got an offer of a house. It was a flat. It was a very nice, big house. It was, and in the top floor was a. He wasn't quite a rabbi, but he was one down. I don't know what the name is, but he was a very Jewish family. And on the bottom floor, there was a Cockney family, very Cockney family.
He used to sing in bed.
And sing in bed. And there was somebody in the middle, and there was rows between three. And what they thought 2 probation officers might be good, so they offered us a flat to keep the peace between the Jewish man at the top and this Cockney family in the bottom.
Where was this?
In Hackney.
Uh-huh. And the Amherst Road.
In the Amherst Road, yes. Very nice house, big house with knobs on the doors and everything, wonderful house. And we got on very well, you see, but fortunately I'm very fond of Jewish people and get on very well. And he used to ask us to go up just before Friday at 6 o'clock and just have a glass of wine. And I thought, well, do I have a glass of wine with this man or not? He's a Jew and I don't drink, you see. And that's another thing I used to do with the Jews in East London. If they've forgotten to light their candles by 6. And he used to ask us to go up just before Friday at 6 o'clock and just have a glass of wine. And I thought, well, do I have a glass of wine with this man or not? He's a Jew and I don't drink, you see. And that's another thing I used to do with the Jews in East London. If they'd forgotten to light their candles by 6, they couldn't do it. And quite often I would go in the light and they'd give me 6pence. And it was a good source of income. You know, going around these Jewish families just hanging about in case they didn't lit their candles. And we got 6pence for lighting their candles. And this Mr. Vine, wasn't it? W-E-I-N, Mr. Vine up there. Very nice family. And then the people we got on very well with the Cockneys downstairs. But I became pregnant and I didn't want this kind of place. I wanted a house with a garden. We had access to a garden downstairs. And I knew about new towns anyway. And my friend Mary Tabor, who I'd worked for as a housing officer, because in between being probation officer, I also did with the housing. I wanted to see what went on in the housing list. So I became a housing officer for 2 years. And Mary Tabor became the first housing manager for Stevenage. Now, you couldn't get a house in Stevenage unless you came from London, had a job to come to, right? So Hugh managed to get a job, and he can talk about this himself, as a probation officer in Hertfordshire. So that meant we could have a house in the new town. And so we wrote to my friend Mary Tabor, sent us the forms, and we were allocated a house. We had a choice of one in Stonycroft and one in Monk's Wood. And I chose Stonycroft because it's only just up the road to Stonycroft, because we're near the old town. And with the baby in the pram, I needed it. So We moved the furniture in August. And my friend, who was a midwife, came with me in case a baby was born. Went back. Fortunately, Jonathan was 10 days late. And we came out and we moved in about... we moved the furniture in August and we came out in about the middle of September with the baby.
Do you actually own the property? Did you actually buy it?
No, nobody, everybody had to rent those days. Everything was rented. You can talk about that later on. Everything was rented. And it was a lovely house. I mean, it's all in our book in there. We had a garden, south-facing garden, 3 bedrooms, toilet downstairs, bathroom, lavatory upstairs. There was a side entrance, a coal cupboard, a coat cupboard, and an outlet and an outhouse. Beautiful house. Wonderful. And that was, we stayed there for 3 years, and then because I wanted the children to learn music, I wanted a detached house. So I got in touch with the housing manager and said I wanted a detached house. And there was one being built. It was a beautiful big house on the 4 bedrooms. So we rented that for 26 years, and all the children learnt their music there, and we didn't annoy the neighbours. It was a beautiful house. So we stayed there for 26 years.
When you actually moved up here, and obviously as I said, your roots were in London, how did it feel coming out? You say your mum felt like it was you were emigrating.
Yeah. Mm.
How did you feel about moving up here?
I felt it was a challenge. I always liked the country anyway, and it was quite nice. And I just felt, you know, this is going to be a new town, it's a new beginning. And I started bringing my mind to work here. I mean, soon after I came here, I was meeting with people and saying, well, what are we going to do? Start a nursery club. We're going to do this. And then that was in 1952. And by 1946, I started the Citizens Advice Bureau. 56, I started the Citizens Advice Bureau.
So how did that come about?
Well, people said that, a number of people were saying in London they were used to having a CAB with their problems. There wasn't anywhere in Stevenage. And a couple of councillors said, you know, didn't you say that you knew a bit about the law and probation? And I said, yes. They said, would you start the CAB? So I trained a few of the people who started the CAB.
What sort of a response did that get when you started
Oh,
up?
very good, very good. And it's gone full cycle now, because I used to have the meetings in the hostel, which is not there anymore, the Workmen's Hostel. And then I felt people, as the town developed and the new town wasn't quite ready, I used to go around and have meetings in the community centres. And they're doing that now, the CAB, so it's gone full cycle. So people come into the community centres to help, yes. And she started that in 56. And in April 59, I was one of those presented to the Queen for starting the CAB and doing the voluntary work from the early days.
Do you remember that day?
Oh, yeah.
What was it like?
Smashing. I'm a royalist, by the way, so I'm not only a Methodist, I'm a royalist.
What was it like? Can you describe the day?
Oh, it was lovely. We went to the Bedwell Community Centre and we introduced there. But before we were introduced, we were told by Tom Hanson, you know, how to curtsy and what to say. And then she got to me and she said to me, Tom Hanson, that she started the Citizens Advice Bureau, etc. So the Queen asked me what kind of problems I deal with. And I said, well, the biggest problem, people don't know the difference between a credit sale and a hire purchase agreement. And the Queen said, well, what is the difference between a credit sale and a hire purchase agreement?
Yes, you have to tell Philip about it.
So I said, well, Your Majesty, I said, now, if you were to go out and buy something, Your Majesty, and had a credit sale, you've borrowed the money, okay? If you have hire purchase, you're hiring the goods. Now, I said, if ever you do that, Your Majesty, don't ever get a credit sale, because if you do not pay your debts, they come and take the article you bought away and say this is worth so much, but it's off your debt, but you still lost the article and you're still paying your debt. I said, far better to go for a hire purchase agreement. So we were having these long...
Tell her about the
and
woman
then
next to you.
she was having a chat with me about all these things. She said...
What did she say?
She said, thank you very much, you know, very interesting, my dear. No. And then the woman next to me, she said, what do you do? She said, well, I represent the Tenants Federation. And she said, one of the main things I've done recently, Your Majesty, is that we find that the buses which go to meet the trains coming into Stevenage Station, as soon as they hear the train arrive, the bus moves off without the passengers. And I can see the Queen's question, how annoying, how annoying. Her Majesty. Yeah. Oh, and then the nice thing was, I had a little, I mean, I'm not really good at mechanical, I had a little sort of Woolworths camera or something there. And as she came out with her equity, and I stood there trying to take a photograph of my camera, and she was walking, and these people were trying to move on, and she went, no. She went to me, and she stood there and let me photograph, and I've got a photograph of my camera upstairs. Very nice. Yeah, I'm a royalist. Yeah, Because what do you put in its place if you don't have the royal family? Do you have a president? Look at the presidents all over the world. You tell me. Okay, maybe the Queen's children are not behaving. It's not the Queen doing it, is it? Like the presidents.
So it was a good day for you then, that was?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can't live in London and not be a royalist. You spend half your time going up to changing the guards, all the pageantry and the colour. Oh, it's lovely, yes.
So obviously you started at the Citizens Advice Bureau. You say you were talking about nursery groups and whatever. Were you quite fundamental in sort of starting off various things? Or you like to have a finger in various pies?
Well, if I see a need, I started. Someone came to me and said, Mrs. Rees, would you start a mother's club? I said, okay. So I started a mother club. It's not there now, St George's Church. And we had lots of mothers there with the children. We had speakers. We had Dame Evelyn Dennington down. And then many years afterwards, when that finished, someone asked me to start an 8 o'clock club for the mothers. You used to come to the mothers club with children had grown up. And people used to come and ask me, like the girl asked me to start the young carers and asked me to do the MS welfare work. People always come along and said, well, could you do this? Could you do this? You know.
What was the community spirit like in Stevenage when it started?
Well, I think Stevenage is a wonderful place. I mean, you tell me, Jane, where can you go in your car, driving along the road to work with grass verges, colourful roundabouts and lots of trees, as if you're in the country? Where can you do that? Where you can get on your bike and cycle all round? And nowadays, with all these sort of cars and traffic, you've got a town centre which is pedestrian. Isn't any fumes for the asthmatic? The children are safe. And people say about all the houses look the same. When I go to towns, I go along, I see houses all the same. You go up north, you see houses all the same. What's wrong with that? It's what the people inside them are like. And people are making their own houses different now because they're buying them. And each neighbourhood in Stevenage, they started off by 6 neighbourhoods. And they're all colour-coded, you know, Bedwell's blue, Sheppel's red, Chelsea's yellow, Pingreen's green, and so on and so forth. And the street naming, I was on the street naming committee earlier, but John Morris was a big man. He was a lecturer in ancient history at London University. And he helped us a great deal, wonderful man. He died long ago. But he said, you see, we had street naming committee. Bedwell is named after country names, and so is Broadwater. Chels is famous men, famous women and poets. Keats Close. Famous women, Eliot, Pankhurst, men, Wren, and so on and so forth. And then Pingreen, you've got cathedrals and famous sportsmen. And then and over in the Hertford Road, it's castles. Up in Simon's Green, it's seaside. So and the town, and we've got such a good council.
What was it when you first got here? What was the atmosphere like with the people moving? Because evidently people came from very different backgrounds, different areas. Yeah. How did it gel?
Well, she could tell you more about that because there wasn't any class system. I was leaving him to tell some of this because there was no class system. There wasn't any hierarchy, no squires, right? And everybody came to see you. The butcher, the baker, all wanted your custom. The vicar came, or the Catholic came. Everybody wanted to come. Every political party came to see you, wanting to join. And because there were very few people on the telephone, we were one of the few was on the phone because of Hugh's work. And people were eager to know each other because you didn't have family around. You depended on each other. You needed each other to form a community. So we started, it's all in the books, nursery schools, all kinds of things. I became a school governor for 32 years, for Bedwell schools, and all kinds of things. And if there was a need, we started it. And also we protested as well. I mean, I was a big one against Luton Airport. I was not allowed to phone them. I had to ring up and I said, it's Connie Rees. They said, there's nobody here to speak to you. So one day I thought, Connie, you can't tell lies. So I rang up and said I was Evelyn Platt. Well, that wasn't true because my second name's Evelyn, my maiden name was Platt. And the person I wanted about 5 minutes before was there, you see. So it proved to me that they didn't want to speak to me. And it wasn't that I wanted to stop the planes flying from Luton. We wanted to stop night flights. And also, they were very noisy. And they were getting all the profit and we were getting all the pollution.
So what were the sort of protests you did? Were you just ringing them and writing to them?
Oh no, we started a campaign in Stevenage. It was called STEVCAN, Stevenage Campaign Against Aircraft Noise. And we had regular meetings. And one meeting I had, and I saw a lot of faces I didn't recognise, and I was chairing the meeting, and I said, excuse me, which part of the town? We're from Luton. And I thought, oh, you know. And I said, oh, they said, we're from Vauxhall. I said, oh, and it turned out they came because when their night work, they couldn't sleep either in their part of Luton with the plane, so they were supporting me. And they were telling me I should run the scheme. And they said, now we've come up with an idea, Mrs. Rees, if you go to Wars and buy solidified concrete, you put it down the loo and it solidifies immediately, no one can go to the loo. And the whole of Luton Airport would come to a close. And I said, I can't really do that. I said, people come from the Midlands for holidays. No way. I want the people to listen to us and get quieter aircraft and cut out night flights. There's a school in Stevenage where they've got deaf children. Now, when these planes came over, they put their hearing aids in. They couldn't stand the noise. They took them out, they couldn't hear the teacher. And we were getting lots of problems. But they wouldn't listen. They wouldn't listen. If only they'd listen to us. They wouldn't listen. And then after a while, gradually, I think things quietened down a bit. And things improved. And they had a big inquiry, and a number of people from Stevenage went over and spoke at the inquiry. And because we were having, somebody asked me to go along for everybody in Stevenage to go in their cars and take their rubbish and throw it down in Luton. I wouldn't have it. I said, no way, I'm not out for that. I want this done verbally and properly for people to listen. People use Luton, I've got no argument with them. But I've got argument with the people who are not listening to our children, deaf children. People at schools, in the carpentry class and metalwork class, when the planes were going over, they had to stop lessons because the children couldn't tell the children whether they were doing was safe. We had lots of problems. And if they'd only listened, if they could have rerouted it, would have helped. They were arrogant, very arrogant.
How did you feel afterwards?
Well, I mean, gradually things began to improve. And then recently, about 2 years ago, there was a very, very noisy plane and I rang up. And because it all died down years now, they listened to me. And it was an Aeroflot, a Russian plane.
Yeah, it's an old plane, very noisy.
Old plane, but that stopped. And I mean, only recently now are we getting noise again and coming at night. I mean, my bed's here, and this is a flight path here. I can see the light because I've put
You're right on it.
I'm right on it. And now I can tell you they're coming at 3, 5 past 3, 10 past 3 and half past 3, and then you've got a lull. Now, I think if they did away with night flights, it would help over Stevenage. Not stop people going on the holiday. I've got to see my daughter abroad, but I always go by day. I think that was the only problem. They did actually improve the planes and they became quieter for a bit. Yes, they did.
How do you think,
Jane,
Steve?
it's 1:30 now. What do you...
I do.
So what do you believe is the biggest change you've seen in Stevenage through the time you've lived here?
Well, the biggest change, I think, in Stevenage is the expansion of the housing programme. We were going to be 40, rising naturally to 60, and then it was 80, right? 80,000 people, yes. But I think the changes are that the town has matured. From being a town without many shops, relying on shops coming round, delivering, we've now got a very good town centre. Okay, part of the town centre at the southern end near the library, some of the shops generally, because we've moved the town centre northwards. But we've got all the major shops are here. We've got one thing we lack, and you and I feel this, we haven't got a decent restaurant. We've got the Corinthian restaurant, but we haven't got a restaurant in the town centre where you can go in and get a meal which isn't foreign food, but you can go and have a decent meal. You know, I feel very strongly about that. I'll have a nice evening out. I mean, if you don't go in pubs, like we don't go into pubs, so where do we go for a nice night out? But I think the town is matured, and I think it's maturing very well. I think we have a good council, and the big thing about our council is that they consult the people. Every couple of months they have a local forum saying, what is wrong with your area? What can be put right? They consult the people, which I approve of. And also the trees are maturing. The people have been here a long time. In the early days, if I go out and I meet somebody like I did yesterday, haven't seen her for a few years, that relationship from the early days you pick up immediately. And I still think Stevenage is matured. The town centre is good. I think we need to look at the parking a bit. I mean, at the moment, you go down and all our car parks are full at Christmas. And I don't like the way that some of the new parts of the town centre have been developed. Not at all, the forum end. I think it could have done a lot better than that. I think the architecture could have been better. I think it's very poor.
You say matured. Is that in the way that you think that the town's developed a character of its own?
I think Stevenage is a character in a sense. I mean, you've got a pedestrian town centre. The only thing is that one side of the town centre, the people paid to have the things across the top. What do they call it? Canopies over the top. It looks quite nice. The other side, the Marks and Spencer side, haven't paid, and that looks a bit odd. But I think the town centre got all the shops. They've now got a sort of medieval ring to it, because if you go down there, they've got little children's roundabouts, hot dogs. It's become like a medieval scene where people go shopping, and there's all the colour there and the interest and the music. I think that's quite nice. I don't like these traders who come in from outside and try to sell things quickly and run off, because you never know what the quality is. But
the actual town, though, do you think it's got a certain atmosphere that is special to itself?
But Stevenage, yes, I think it is. I think Stevenage is a town where if there's anything wrong, people will speak out. You've only got to look at the letters in the paper about that, and I like it. People are not down and say, well, we'll leave it to the council, although we have a good council. The people in this town, if you and I always say, if we wanted something to protest about, we could get a committee ready in about half an hour by ringing around people and saying, what do you think about this? And that is still here. The other people have been here, and for some time are very proud of Stevenage. The danger is that the feeling of the new town, what it meant, why it was built, to give houses to people from the areas of London, because they couldn't rebuild because of all the rubble. And so they came to Stevenage, a new town. We're very proud of it. The heart of the town lies in its people. And it does. And we've got to get young people to know, like I've got these group of youngsters around here, look after your town. It's your town. It's going to be the best place to live in. And it's up to us to do it. And I think on the whole, Stevenage is a very good place to live. The crime isn't any worse than anywhere else. Our problems are not worse than anywhere else. In fact, we do more. If you're elderly and disabled, the best place to live is in Stevenage. We've got our own hotel for the elderly down in Eastbourne. Very cheap holidays. We've got Dial-A-Ride, we've got Access Committee, Transport Committee. I'm on them all.
That doesn't surprise me, I have to say. What was I going to ask you? Yeah, the actual atmosphere, you say that the town's matured. In what way would you say it's matured?
Well, it's matured for having the major shops here. I mean, I had to fight a hard battle. People coming to me saying, Connie, when are we going to have Marks and Spencers? And I've got all the correspondence upstairs in my file. There's several lists I wrote saying, oh, well, it's not economically viable, you haven't got enough population, so on and so forth. And I used to write and say to them, look, we've got lots of young children. Our birth rate was twice the national average in Stevenage. Well, if children are growing, they want clothes. So I felt their economics was not correct, and I had to write and tell them so. So in the end, they eventually came, I think, in 1967. And then gradually we got C&A's, home stores, Little Woods, Boots, and we've got all the stores. And people, the only thing I'm worried about, Jane, is because the town centre's attracted so many people, the shopping centres in the neighbourhoods which were there, each neighbourhood had one or two shops, and then they had a big shopping centre in the main part of the neighbourhood, 6 shops. You go to those areas and some of those shops are all empty. And that's very sad, as if people find it easier to get in their cars and go downtown. And that's rather sad. Because what do? Can people afford to run a shop? If we are going to say we don't only have 1 or 2 shops there, well, let's make the rest of those shops into flatlets on the ground floor for the elderly and the disabled, but not leave them empty.
One thing you mentioned to me earlier about was the links with Zimbabwe. How did that come about?
Well, I had this link because of Guy Clapham Brock, and when he was imprisoned, he came out, and then we met him at the airport. And he came to stay with us for a bit. He met some people in Stevenage. And then Didymus Mutaza was imprisoned. And he was a man of peace. And I wrote to Ian Smith several times and to our government and saying, this man's been imprisoned. He's a man of peace. And I wrote to Ian Smith, you said you've imprisoned the wrong man. He's a Christian, he's a man of peace. Eventually he was released, and he wrote a book, Black Behind Bars. And in the front of it he put, thank you to Connie Rees for getting me out of prison. And so I've had these links. And when Didymus used to come to London to meet Guy, I used to go round and have lunch with them in the Ebury Hotel in Victoria. And then just before Didymus was coming to meet me and Guy and myself in London, there was a piece in a local paper saying our town wants to link with a country in the third world. And I rang them and said, why not go to Zimbabwe? I've got links with the government there. I mean, Mugabe, I know him and wrote to him. And so John Bentley came with me and met Didymus. Didymus went back, and that's how we started our link with Zimbabwe and Kadoma. So that's how it goes, and I've still got links. And recently I met a group of Christians, came over from Zimbabwe. I spoke to them because they've got problems over there with health and young carers, and I'm now helping them to set up a scheme, a young carers scheme. I checked out that the Lions Club is in Kadoma, where we linked with. There's 2 Lions Clubs, there's a YMCA, and I'm linking them all in so they can start a carer scheme over there now.
When you look to the future now, to the Millennium, what does the Millennium mean to you?
As a Christian, it's a celebration of Christ. No more, no less. But if through the celebration of Christ we can implement some of Christ's ideals into this country, his ideals, if you don't consider his theology, but look at his ideals, you're out there to help people. He was there for the underdog, he was there to help people. And if we, in the next millennium, go forward from here now, saying the whole world looks to where a need is and try to help their neighbour and to be friendly and kind, then I think we will have succeeded in the millennium. But it's got to be done for me on that basis.
What do you think should be done then for the Millennium? What do you think is the best way to mark these ideals?
Well, first of all, I think we could have conversations with young people to say, as you're asking me, well, what does it mean to them? Does it mean more televisions, more mechanical goods? Or is it a way of life for them? Is it a way of life? Have they got a start? Has they got a chance to start again, young people? To say, we don't like the world we live. We live in a terrible world. Drugs, ecstasy, cars, fumes. What are young people doing about it? Why don't you all rise up and say you want to get off? It's not a place to live. You don't have to be a Christian and follow me. You may be Hindu or Muslim or what. But let's look at all our groups, all these different faiths, in an interfaith group in Britain to say, look, this is where we are. This is the millennium. How can we go forward? And let's speak to young people. Let's get some booklets out for the millennium and say, where do you want to go? What kind of life do you want? What sort of life, what sort of country do you want to live in? Be proud of your country. You're not better than anywhere else, but you're as good as anywhere else, and have your say about it.
There are lots of Millennium projects to do that sort of thing.
Where? I haven't seen it.
The community projects and funding that's coming up, and of course the Dome. Is this? You think that there's something else needed as well?
I'm not very happy about the Dome. I think we could have celebrated the millennium by having maybe a new hospital or something very new that people need, something that really people do need very much. Hospital or something somewhere. Some better schools, maybe a school in each town, a millennium school, where they could have smaller classes so they could spread the class. Something other than spending the money on something which is very material and which hasn't any real philosophy behind it.
What do you hope for the future now?
For me or for the world?
For the world.
To live in peace, and for mankind to look at each other and find a worth in each other. And then we'd be a happy place to live in.
And on a personal level?
For me, to remain fit as I possibly can, to carry on with the work that I'm doing, and to continue to the end of my days enjoying my grandchildren. There's my 2 granddaughters up there. And to be able to go and see them in America and enjoy the family, which I do all the time.
What do you think has been the biggest thing in your life? Is there one thing that stands out or one change that you can pinpoint?
Marrying Hugh. Best thing I ever did. Wonderful person, I still feel that way. Marvellous. I've had 3 wonderful children, got on well with his relatives. He gets on well with my family, all a bit odd, but he gets on well with them. And
different breed.
I think, and the fact that we were both probation officers, we're both Christian, we're both Methodist, although we think alike on very important issues, where we have our own diversity of opinion on other things, and it's there, and there's that faith. Yes, I think it's wonderful. I was so fortunate to have met you in court, and I see that was a good day for me.
Okay, Connie, that's lovely. Thank you.